On this episode of China Uncensored, I miss Ask Jeeves. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Good news, everyone. Google has finally taken the chains off. Back in May, Google removed its famous "Don't be evil" motto from its code of conduct. Google's new motto is, "Don't let anyone find out that you're evil." Moral relativism is cool. What is evil anyway? Don't be unprofitable. Don't learn from your mistakes. No, history never repeats itself. Or at least, that's what I assume from this article from The Intercept. It turns out there's a traitorous Google employee who still hasn't gotten the hang of being evil, but hiding it per company policy. Because that employee revealed Google's top secret project, making a censored Android app for China that uses their search engine. The secret project is called Dragonfly, and it's allegedly been in the works among a select number of employees since the spring of 2017. We reached out to Google for comment about their search engine in China. Their Google spokesperson said they do have mobile apps in China, but they don't comment on speculation about future plans. It's like if your wife asks, "You're not going to eat that entire box of Cheez-Its in one sitting, are you?" And you reply, "There are things I'm going to eat, but I don't comment on specific future eating plans." So, China has a pretty big internet market. 750 million internet users. That's bigger than the entire population of Europe. And it seems like, well, there's a ton of money Google could be making in China. And now that Google isn't concerned about not being evil, they can finally tap into it, with the help of an unnamed Chinese partner company. As you know, the Chinese Communist Party likes to keep a tight grip on the internet. Otherwise, Chinese citizens might learn dangerous things, like how their government was totally willing to massacre a bunch of students in Tiananmen Square. With the new Google search engine app for Android, Chinese people don't need to know all that, because they won't even be able to find links to troubling informational websites with, facts, like the BBC or Wikipedia. Now, you might be concerned that Google's new alleged Chinese search engine would create some kind of bad precedent. That if the biggest search engine in the world is willing to cave to Chinese censorship demands, why should any company resist? It's a fair point, but may I remind you how much money is on the line here, people? In fact, maybe Google's new motto is actually, "Don't be unprofitable." After all, being evil can make you so much money. Clearly, that important point was lost on the Google employee who leaked the secret plan. He told The Intercept, "I'm against large companies and governments collaborating in the oppression of their people, and feel like transparency around what's being done is in the public interest, and that what is done in China will become a template for many other nations." What? Are you saying that this will embolden other authoritarian nations to further limit free information? Well, don't worry, because other authoritarian nations don't have 750 million internet users. Ka-ching! Google is a company with 88,000 employees. You can't expect them all to have jumped on the evil is okay bandwagon. So, to minimize the chance of leaks, only a handful of top executives and managers knew about Project Dragonfly. Executives like the current CEO. Last December, he traveled to China and met with top Communist Party officials who had great money-making ideas, as communist officials always do. That same month, Google opened an artificial intelligence research center in Beijing. In May, they brought their file management app to the Chinese market. And in July, they launched a fun game for the popular Chinese messaging app WeChat. Let's just say there are some privacy concerns about WeChat. Clearly not a concern for Google, though. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Google's unnamed Chinese partner company is Tencent, the maker of WeChat. I wonder if this new app will also give user data directly to the Chinese government, just like WeChat does. Now, some people have compared Google's move to the shameful history of IBM in Nazi Germany. I mean, I'm not making that comparison. I'm just saying some people have, and now you know that. But giving in to the Chinese regime isn't actually new for Google. They were in China before. In 2006, Google set up a highly censored version of their search engine for the Chinese market, and Google got slammed for it. Here's a clip from a 2006 congressional hearing about American tech companies. U.S. Congressman Chris Smith was not too happy with Google.
When a user enters a forbidden word, such as democracy or Chinese torture, or Falun Gong, the search results are blocked, or you are redirected to a misleading site and the user's computer can be frozen for unspecified periods of time. It is hard not to draw the conclusion that Google has seriously compromised its "don't be evil" policy.
Well, guess what, foolish politician actually trying to call out a big corporation for its shady behavior? Google doesn't have the "don't be evil" policy anymore. Take that. Problem solved. So what happened to that censored Chinese version of Google that Congressman Smith was complaining about in 2006? 4 years later, Google backed out. In a 2010 official blog post, they said, guess what? The Chinese Communist Party hacked us, and they targeted the Gmail accounts of human rights activists. Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal. Google stood up to the evil Chinese regime. They announced that they were uncensoring their search engine, and if that meant the regime kicked them out of China, so be it. And so it was. Google co-founder Sergey Brin, who partly grew up in the Soviet Union, told the Wall Street Journal that he was worried about China's totalitarianism. At the time, I praised Google for doing the right thing. It turned out later, their pullout might have been about more than just doing what was right. It was also maybe because they were hardly making any money in China. But don't worry, Google is under new leadership now, and their new motto is, don't learn from your mistakes. Because the lesson from this should have been, it's really hard for Google to make money in China because the Chinese regime will always stack the cards against you in favor of Chinese companies while also hacking you and stealing your intellectual property. But the lesson the new Google CEO took was, if at first you don't succeed, try again. But now with more evil. The sad part is, Google is hardly alone in wanting to be in China. Bing and Yahoo already have censored search engines there, although they have a fraction of the market share of Chinese companies like Baidu. Apple has made a huge investment in China, and we all know that Mark Zuckerberg will literally run through the Beijing smog to get Facebook there. But at one point, Google was alone in standing up to the Chinese Communist Party, which makes this new search engine thing so much more disappointing. And now the question on my mind is, if Google does get back into the Chinese market and is desperate to make money there, what happens if someday the Chinese Communist Party decides it doesn't like how Google operates outside China, like they do with, I don't know, international airlines calling Taiwan a country? To get into the Chinese market, would Google be more evil outside China too? As someone who hosts the world's most important English-language satirical news show about China on YouTube, which is owned by Google, I'm a little bit concerned. When you have a moment, try this. Do a search for China Uncensored. China Uncensorship Pollution? That's a funny autocomplete. Oddly enough, our newer, much smaller podcast, China Unscripted, does come up. We've also had fans of the show tell us that they've stopped seeing China Uncensored in recommended videos, that they get no notification of new episodes even when they have the notification bell turned on. We're constantly having videos get demonetized. And get this, some viewers have told me they were suddenly unsubscribed from China Uncensored. That even happened to Shelley, who, is on the show. And I'm sure all of these problems will get much better once Google has serious financial stakes in China. There's no evidence that Google is intentionally targeting China Uncensored. It could just be that Google is inept, and that is completely possible. You see, China is no less totalitarian than it was back in 2010, when Google initially pulled out. In fact, they are increasingly using online surveillance to control Chinese people. But even if Google doesn't care about being evil anymore, even if all they care about is making money for their shareholders, or if they're just drooling over the idea of getting a piece of 750 million internet users, going into China is a bad idea. Having a Chinese partner company may help Google make more money, but there's definitely a price to pay, and it might be higher than they think. Which is why Google should really change their motto to, don't be stupid. What do you think about Google's re-entry into China? What should be their new motto? Leave your comments below. And now, it's time to answer questions from fans who support this show on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Alfred Schneider asks, Chris, I've heard that the PRC has built some delightful vacation resorts in the South China Sea. Which one would you like to visit the most and why? Oh, Alfred, that is probably the toughest question I've been asked so far. There are so many, how can I choose? Yes, the Chinese Communist Party is developing a booming tourism industry in the South China Sea, particularly in disputed territories. I mean, my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, makes a vacation there sound so appealing. Look at that beachfront view. Since 2013, around 10,000 Chinese tourists have been able to enjoy the natural beauty of the Xisha Islands, otherwise known as the Paracel Islands, territory claimed by China, Vietnam, and Taiwan. The best part about vacationing in these wonderful resorts is probably the flybys from Chinese nuclear-capable bombers. Now, if that doesn't sound like a vacation, I don't know what does. Just like the tourists in this Global Times article, I too would love to travel to the Xisha/Paracel Islands on the Coconut Fragrance Princess, watch a flag-raising ceremony as the Chinese national anthem is played over the water, and talk about never giving up an inch of China's territorial integrity. Thanks for your question, Alfred. And before we wrap up, this is a good time to make a plug for your support. This show is funded mainly not through Google ads, but through contributions from viewers like you. You can contribute $1 or more per episode through the crowdfunding website Patreon. You'll get cool rewards, including a chance to have your questions for me answered here on the show. And even if you can't support China Uncensored on Patreon, you can make a huge difference by just sharing the show with your family and friends, since Google is going to make that as hard as possible. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time. You know, China Uncensored isn't just on YouTube. We have half-hour episodes you can watch on cable in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Check your local listings. And you can also download our China Uncensored app on Apple TV, Roku, or Fire TV. Or just visit www.chinauncensored.tv.